Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, 4 vetoes overridden in the North Carolina General Assembly yesterday. Democrats crashing out on the House floor. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand. It's real simple and easy and free to do so. Just head on over to your favorite podcast app, search for the Nick Craig Show, tap the subscribe or follow button. You'll take a new program with you each and every weekday morning. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. For any legal questions or challenges, 910-251-6088. Or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. We'll hear more from them coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. And tonight, final reminder, our Nick Craig Show monthly hangout heading your way tonight, 7 p.m. Look forward to chatting with everybody. For those that support the show over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. I'll send out a reminder email a little bit later on this morning. 7 o'clock tonight, patreon.com/Nick Craig. Looking forward to chatting with everyone. It was an incredibly busy Wednesday in Raleigh as the North Carolina General Assembly begins the process of wrapping up the 2026 legislative short session. I've talked about this in some pretty great detail over the last couple of months. There remained 5 pieces of legislation on the House calendar. These were veto overrides that the Senate in large part had already dealt with, but had not yet been dealt with by the North Carolina House. And every week that lawmakers came back, there was a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty as to, okay, these veto overrides remain. When are lawmakers finally going to get to the process where they can begin to override them? And here's the reason why this took the amount of time that it did. Currently, for vetoes to be overridden in the North Carolina General Assembly as prescribed by state law, which I'll note is in large part thanks to, at this time, State Senator Roy Cooper, who was one of the leading champions in introducing the gubernatorial veto, requires a 3/5 majority of both chambers, the House and the Senate, to override a veto of the governor. And with that, in the North Carolina Senate, Republicans have that 3/5 majority all the time. If every Republican is there and voting, they have the votes needed, they have the majority needed, they can override vetoes. In the North Carolina House, it is a little bit of a different discussion. With the entire House present, Republicans need 72 votes to override a veto. There are 71 Republicans in the North Carolina House, meaning that either Democrats need to be absent from the House chambers to meet that margin, or at least one Democrat needs to cross the aisle and vote with Republicans to conduct this veto override. That is in large part why this unfinished business, these reconsideration of these vetoed pieces of legislation from Democrat Governor Josh Stein, had remained and were on the calendar for a pretty significant period of time. Well, yesterday was finally the day, getting as lawmakers gavelled in shortly after 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, going through some business, and then it was off to the races as House Speaker Destin Hall announced that they were going to work on to or go into the unfinished business on the House calendar dealing with these veto overrides. 5 pieces of legislation on the calendar. House Bill 171 dealt with DEI in state agencies. Senate Bill 227 eliminated DEI in public schools, K through 12 public education. Senate Bill 558 dealt with DEI in higher education, the UNC and community college system. Senate Bill 153, the North Carolina Border Protection Act, and Senate Bill 50, Freedom to Carry NC, also known as constitutional carry. 4 of those 5 bills were dealt with and overridden by the North Carolina House yesterday. Senate Bill 50, the constitutional carry legislation, remains not yet dealt with by the North Carolina General Assembly. We'll get into why that is the case coming up in a little bit. So again, the math has been the issue. There has not been, and there's not 72 Republicans, which is what is needed to conduct these overrides. However, the reason that these were able to happen in Raleigh yesterday is because 2 Democrats were absent, or 2 previous Democrats were absent from the chamber. If the names Carla Cunningham and Shelley Willingham sound vaguely familiar to you, or maybe you know those names very well, you'll know that those 2 individuals who have been long-standing members of the North Carolina General Assembly, longtime Democrat Party members, both lost their primary elections back in March of this year, just back a couple of months ago when primaries rolled through the state of North Carolina. Why did those 2 individuals lose their primaries? Well, pretty simply and pretty clear, because the Democrat machine here in North Carolina went against 2 of their members. Both Representative Cunningham and Representative Shelley Willingham at previous points during the legislative long session in 2025 bucked their party, bucked the trend, and voted with the Republican-led legislature. And for that reason, the Democrat machine, including Democrat Governor Josh Stein, went full press against them, went all out in the primary election. Representative Cunningham and Representative Willingham losing their primaries. They will not be making their way back to the North Carolina General Assembly in 2027. And so while there may be, and for Democrats, obviously they want unity. They obviously want all of their members to be voting with them 100% of the time. And for these 2 representatives, Cunningham and Willingham, and there's another one, Representative Nasheed from Mecklenburg County as well, they were voting with Democrats 99% of the time. 99% of the time. These weren't soft Democrats that were voting with the Republicans 50-50. No, for all intents and purposes, they voted with Democrats every single time up until a couple of pieces of legislation during the long session last year. And for that reason, they got went after by the Democrat Party and lost their primaries. And so that sets up this very interesting power dynamic that now Democrats have to deal with, that now Democrats have to work through the remainder of 2026. And so absent yesterday were Cunningham and Willingham. With their absences, that 3/5 majority meant that 71 votes, which it happens to be the exact number of Republicans in the North Carolina House, 71 votes was all that was needed for the veto overrides. And for the 4 votes that happened, the 4 veto overrides, they all passed in the exact same margin, 71-47. This is yet again another situation where Democrats created their own problem. The Democrat Party themselves, by primarying them, by going after them, by being incredibly nasty to them, pushed members aside, and it just so happened to be that those 2 members did what is called taking a walk during the legislative session Wednesday in Raleigh. There is nobody else to blame. There is nobody else to point a finger at. There is nobody else to complain to besides the Democrat Party, because they demand 100% unity. They demand that you vote as a Democrat 100% of the time, regardless of whether the vote helps or hurts your constituents, whether the vote helps or hurts the people that you are supposed to be representing in Raleigh. If, God forbid, you break from the Democrat talking points, God forbid you break from the Democrat narrative and vote with the GOP, vote your conscience, vote with what you think is right, the Democrats in North Carolina have made it abundantly clear that you will be tossed to the side. You will be primaried, your party resources will be stripped away from you, and you will lose your seat. Now, that's fine if that's how the Democrats want to operate here in North Carolina. I'm not here to tell the Democrat Party that they have to operate in a certain way, but the end result is you now have 3 members that were previously Democrats sitting in the North Carolina General Assembly for who the next 6 months obviously have an axe to grind with the Democrat Party. That is the only reason that these veto overrides were allowed to happen yesterday. The only reason. And so for all the bitching and complaining and all of the crying from Democrats that these vetoes were overridden, take a look in the freaking mirror, guys. It's your own fault. It's your own problem. You created this monster. You created this problem, and now you're going to have to deal with it for the next 6 months. So you may have gotten your short-term win in March and standing tall, Anderson Clayton and the Democrat Party. We primaried these Democrats who, by the way, voted with us 99% of the time. Well, now you've got to deal with these overrides. We're talking about a busy Wednesday in Raleigh as the North Carolina House voted and overrode 4 different vetoes that had been vetoed in months past by Democrat Governor Josh Stein. 3 of the pieces of legislation dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of them dealing with immigration, border security here across the state of North Carolina. So let's jump into some of the commentary from the floor of the North Carolina House. Senate Bill 153, that was the North Carolina Border Protection Act. Representative Reese Purtle, the Republican from Rockingham County, explained this legislation on the floor.
This bill would require the Secretary of the Department of Public Safety, the Secretary of the Department of Adult Corrections, the Commander of the State Highway Patrol, the Director of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations, to enter into an agreement with U.S. Immigration and Customs to fully cooperate with immigration laws. This bill also requires state law enforcement officials to receive appropriate training provided by ICE and to function under the supervision of ICE when complying with the agreement. Cities and counties who violate these laws and instead adopt sanctuary ordinances will be found to have waived governmental immunity when an illegal alien commits a crime against a person or property located in any city or county limits. We also need to take tangible steps to ensure that taxpayer funds are being spent wisely, especially when it comes to public benefits. Only those who are eligible for those benefits should receive them. This bill would require the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Housing Finance Agency, and all local housing authorities to cease providing state-funded benefits and public-funded housing benefits to illegal aliens. These agencies will also be required to develop a plan to update and review eligibility criteria for all state-funded benefits and publicly funded housing benefits to ensure non-citizens residing in the United States without legal permission are ineligible to receive those benefits. The Department of Commerce will also be required to adopt and implement policy to verify that all applicants for unemployment benefits are legally authorized to reside in the United States prior to receiving first payment of these benefits by January the 15th, 2026. Finally, it prohibits the UNC system campuses from adopting any policy that does not cooperate with federal immigration enforcement and or adopting a sanctuary school policy.
Pretty straightforward there. You were listening to the voice of Representative Reese Purtle, the Republican from Rockingham County, laying out details on Senate Bill 153, the North Carolina Border Protection Act. The long and the short of the legislation, pretty simple. The bill requires state law enforcement agencies to comply with federal immigration detainers and cooperate with U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement when a person in custody is believed to be in the country illegally. And it also targets municipalities across the state of North Carolina that have adopted so-called sanctuary policies and allows individuals in those municipalities, if they fall victim to crimes at the hands of illegal immigrants to hold them accountable for refusing to follow that state immigration law. Pretty straightforward piece of legislation. Here was the counterpoint to that, the argument from Representative Maria Severia, the Democrat from Wake County.
We must uphold this veto.
Well, you did.
Because this bill, again, I say, is overreaching. It asks too much of our law enforcement. It invites constitutional challenges, as we see nationally in states that have adopted similar or the same laws, which, again, is a burden on us when it comes to budgetary money. And it makes risks an unintended harm to communities all over our state without making us meaningfully safe. We live here together. We have neighbors. I want to implore you to think about the people you live around, the people you represent. It could even be donors that give to you. Republican and Democrats, we're not only just white, Black, Asian, Native American. You know you have constituents that are everyone. And I want you to remember that and where they came from and your promise to make everybody in this state, including your constituents, safe.
Yeah, I don't believe the state constitution mandates that lawmakers in Raleigh make sure that the state is safe for individuals that are illegally in the United States of America, which would therefore mean illegally in the state of North Carolina. Folks, it's not a very controversial bill. We have seen states and municipalities across the U.S. that refuse to comply with federal immigration law. It makes those cities an incredibly dangerous place to be, an incredibly dangerous place to live. And so regardless, all of the, oh my God, you're attacking immigrant communities. Oh my God, you're being a racist. Oh my God, you're doing this and doing that. Regardless of all of the nonsensical objections, regardless of all the back and forth bickering, 71-47 was the final vote. And now Senate Bill 153, the North Carolina Border Protection Act, is officially law here in North Carolina, notwithstanding the veto of Democrat Governor Josh Stein. The governor responded to this and responded to all of these pieces of legislation, saying it's time for them, referring to lawmakers, to do their job for the people of North Carolina. Instead, they are overriding my veto on bills to whitewash the diversity that makes our state strong and take state law enforcement officers away from their existing state duties, forcing them to act as federal immigration agents. Ooh. Scary. We're taking law enforcement away and making them federal. Actually, that's not the case at all. There is already laws on the books here in North Carolina, one of which caused Representative Carla Cunningham to lose her primary election, that mandates that state law enforcement officials comply with federal immigration law. And that if there is a federal detainer placed on somebody, that local law enforcement, whether that's a sheriff's department or a municipal police department or the state highway patrol, any sworn law enforcement agency and agent here in the state of North Carolina has to comply with that detainer. Why? Because if you're illegally in the United States of America, I know it's a wild concept, a wild idea. If you're here in the United States of America illegally, you shouldn't be, and you need to deal with the consequences of your actions, which in most cases is deportation. Again, we're not talking about individuals who are here legally. We're not talking about individuals that are here on visas or here with a green card or followed the process to come into the United States of America. We are talking about individuals who have decided to give the middle finger to the United States of America, give the middle finger to our immigration law, and come into the country illegally. I don't care what their situation is. I don't care what the process was. If you came into the United States illegally, that was a decision you made, and there are repercussions for those actions. So regardless the grandstanding, regardless the back and forth arguments and bickering in Raleigh, this is what the law says now. That's it. That's the law. Republicans have the majority. They passed the legislation. Surprise, surprise, the Democrat governor here in North Carolina, who is soft on crime, soft on immigration, vetoed it, and Republicans were able to successfully do a veto override on that yesterday. We'll cover some additional veto overrides dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Before that, I want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington. Thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show, and remind you that when legal challenges or questions arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Going back to 2003, Melissa Gott and their experienced team of attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of our state. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, no matter the issue, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. They've got a great website over at lawgroupnc.com, a blog that discusses a variety of legal challenges and issues that you may be dealing with. You can read about their attorneys, read about their background, their experiences, their areas of expertise. They've also got some great social media channels as well, including Facebook and X. All of those links at lawgroupnc.com. You can also give them a call, 910-251-6088, or again, lawgroupnc.com, 910-251-6088. It's the law group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, we'll grab a quick break. More from a busy Wednesday in Raleigh coming up after this as the Nick Craig Show continues streaming live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Thursday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, continuing our coverage of what was a busy Wednesday in Raleigh as the Republican-led North Carolina General Assembly, more specifically the North Carolina House, successfully overrode 4 governor vetoes. One of the pieces of legislation that we just talked about dealing with immigration and customs enforcement. The 3 others dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here is the breakdown. House Bill 171, equality in state agencies / prohibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Senate Bill 227, eliminating DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in public education. And Senate Bill 558, eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI in public higher education. That would be the UNC and community college system. The previous bill dealing with K through 12 public education. These pieces of legislation, again, all dealing with DEI. The debate, no surprise, taking place on this legislation as well. Here is Representative Brendan Jones from Columbus County describing some details on this much broader House Bill 171 dealing with state agencies.
171 says state agencies and local governments cannot use taxpayer money to promote, fund, or maintain DEI programs that influence hiring, employment, contracts based on race, sex, ethnicity, national origin, or similar characteristics. It ends DEI offices, DEI staff positions, and required DEI training in government workplaces. Let's be clear, this bill does not repeal civil rights laws. It does not stop reasonable accommodations. It does not interfere with Title IX, the ADA, Title VI, or federal anti-discrimination law. And it does not prohibit holidays, observances, data collection, or Indian education services. What it does is restore common sense. Government hiring should be based on qualifications. Contracts should be based on merit, and government services should be open and equal to every citizen.
What a novel concept. Hiring and contracting with the best capable individuals, ignoring and not looking at the backgrounds and factors like race, religion, and sex. Just hiring again and working with the best qualified individuals regardless of their background, something that Democrats seemingly cannot wrap their head around. Here's Representative Quick from Guilford County arguing against this legislation.
This bill is cookie cutter and unoriginal in a state that prides itself on being first, not next. We were first in flight, first in the state university system, but now we are attempting to be the very next state to pass a bill that will not withstand history because our nation is diverse. We are diverse, we continue to strive for equity, and we are inclusive. And we who have fought for centuries to make this nation just that are standing on the right side of history. To vote for this bill is to be unoriginal, to be mean-spirited, and to be detrimental to the further progress and success of the state of North Carolina. The world does not look one way. And as we invite the world and even see the world on our televisions watching the World Cup, we see the power of diversity and equity and inclusion. I ask you to sustain the governor's veto or be on the wrong side of history.
Yawn. I mean, it's the same sorry old talking points from Democrats. Oh, my God, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're rolling back centuries of work, decades of work that have taken place. We talked about DEI in great detail. I'm not going to sit here and rehash all of it here on the program today. DEI has been completely weaponized by those on the political left. DEI does not stand for diversity. It does not stand for inclusion. It does not stand for equity. No. DEI in its current form, and we see this all across the United States, stands for actively discriminating against individuals based on things like their sex, their race, and their religion. That is what modern day DEI means and stands for in the United States. And if you as a private business want to operate that way, have at it. I can choose as a consumer, as a free market capitalist, whether I want to do business with you. But state government should not be involved in this in any way, shape, or form. And that is exactly what this piece of legislation, House Bill 171, does. That's exactly what it does. It says that state agencies are barred from requiring employers to take DEI training, using DEI-related statements or criteria in hiring, promoting, or contracting decisions. We need to be hiring and working with the best qualified individuals regardless of their background. Democrats, of course, do not like that. And here was some of the exchange that took place as Democrats crashed out on the House floor over, well, these veto overrides.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask Representative Jones how women have felt since...
The lady will suspend, and members will not speak until they're recognized. The lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Budd, is recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to ask
What's the
Representative
lady's
Jones a
purpose?
question.
Representative Budd, for what purpose does the lady rise?
To ask a question.
The lady can't ask to yield a question when the motion for previous question has been carried. Both sides have up to 3 minutes to debate. You can't ask for a question.
I appreciate you pointing out the debate has been cut off deliberately. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Well, our rules allow for the previous question to be adopted, and the chair recalls that vote on our rules was either unanimous or nearly unanimous, and those are the rules the body has adopted.
And of course, I mean, Democrats don't like following the rules, so I went back and looked. The rules that were passed by the North Carolina General Assembly. April the 1st, April Fool's Day, funny enough, of 2025, the bill or the House Resolution 563 House Permanent Rules was passed in a 98-17 vote by the North Carolina General Assembly, laying out and establishing the rules for the chamber. These are the rules that were being followed. These are the rules that were agreed to by the vast majority of the General Assembly, Democrats and Republicans alike. As I mentioned, there's only 71 Republicans in Raleigh, in the North Carolina House. Yet the vote on the rules that are playing out in front of your very eyes got 98 votes. You can do the math on that. Democrats supported it. 17 did not, including Representative Budd, who then wanted to argue. This piece of this rule package, the House Permanent Rules, was passed well over a year ago in the General Assembly. So that was some of the objections, some of the complaints from lawmakers. Here is Representative Maury complaining again about the process that, in fact, are the rules of the House.
In our rules, Rule 8 is a question of privilege. And I would like to raise this question of privilege about calling the question and not allowing a debate on the vetoes. If I may, this is a question of integrity of the House. It's a question of our side of the aisle being able to speak on a very important debate over the veto that has been on the calendar for months, weeks, days, in which every member has said, be in your seats, be ready for these vetoes. And to call the question before one member is able to debate this, I think violates our integrity of our proceedings, the rights of individual members, and I ask you to reconsider. Thank you.
Chair understands the lady's concern. The rules clearly stating that a motion for previous question can be put forth by the body. By necessity, they can't violate the spirit and rules of the other rules. And the chair would also note, as is always the case for vetoes, these bills have already been voted on by this body, and in some cases with these bills, the provisions therein being voted on multiple times by the body. And obviously the members who may do so under the rules can move the previous question if they wish, and if there was, frankly, there's nothing in here that we've not debated at length already. So the lady's point is noted, and that is the chair's response.
Great point there by Representative and House Speaker Destin Hall, because all of these bills, again, we're not talking about the first vote on these pieces of legislation. No, we're talking about veto overrides. Every single one of these bills that you are talking about, that we are talking about here today, has had hours worth of debate in both the North Carolina House and North Carolina Senate, where Democrats have been able to argue the issue, Democrats have been able to argue their points and the problems that they have with it. There has been hours worth of debate on this legislation. But again, Democrats being in the minority, not having the power in Raleigh, all they are left with is complaining and arguing. They're not in the majority. They do not have the power to actually govern and actually lead. And so what did they do? Calling the rules, claiming that the process isn't being followed, complaining about the process that they are in. Literally hours worth of debate on every single one of these pieces of legislation that we're talking about here this morning. We are covering a very busy day in Raleigh as the North Carolina General Assembly, the Republican-led House, worked through 4 veto overrides in Raleigh yesterday. We've already talked about 2 of them. The first one, Senate Bill 153, the North Carolina Border Protection Act, passing 71 to 47. Another piece of legislation, House Bill 171, dealing with DEI in state agencies. That restricts those agencies and local governments from using public funds to promote, fund, implement, or maintain DEI initiatives. Also passed to 71 to 47. That is now law. 2 other DEI bills that we're going to get into right now deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion in K through 12 public education and higher education. Let's start off with Senate Bill 227. Here's Representative Jones describing that.
This bill is about keeping our schools focused on what they were built to do: teach children, respect every student, and prepare them for life. Senate Bill 227 says public schools should not promote concepts that divide students by race or sex. It says no child should be taught that one race or sex is superior to another. No child should be told that they're inherently racist, sexist, oppressive, guilty, or morally defined because of the race or sex they were born with. That is not censorship, that is common sense. This bill protects the teaching of history. It expressly allows instruction.
Representative Jones, just 1 second. For what purpose, the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Clicker-Rice?
Is it permissible to ask Representative Jones a question as to what he thinks black children have been going through since history has been started?
So the motion, previous question.
To hear over and over again?
Members, as the member knows, you can't. There is no debate on the previous question having been passed. The majority leader has up to 3 minutes. The minority leader has up to 3 minutes. And so therefore, Representative Jones, the gentleman, continues to have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This also protects speech, independent research, and anything required by state or federal law. And it makes clear that schools must prohibit discrimination, including antisemitism, and employment conduct policies and student codes of conduct. Members, every child in North Carolina deserves to walk into a classroom and be treated as an individual, not as a category. It's not a stereotype. It's not a symbol of guilt or grievance. We want schools teaching reading, writing, math, history, science, and civics. We want schools to teach children how to think and not what political doctrine they must believe. The governor vetoed this bill that stands for dignity, non-discrimination, honesty, and equal treatment. Today, we should override that veto. Let us stand with parents and students. Let us stand with teachers who want to teach and not indoctrinate. I urge the body to vote yes.
Well, and of course, Democrats are all in favor of indoctrination. The K through 12 public education system has become their most useful political tool to indoctrinate the next generation of radical leftists and radical left-wingers here in the United States. Surprise, surprise, Democrats against this legislation as well. Here's Representative Zach Hawkins from Durham County.
President Trump and Republican lawmakers have spent the past few months and the past few years now tearing down scholarship programs, erasing military recognitions and historical records, even putting our national security at risk because of DEI. And with this bill, we put our reputation of being able to make sure that we are building out not only the current students that are in our classrooms, but those are the current people who will work in our jobs. And what the workforce says that we need to do is be able to invest in every single child, make sure that they feel seen, heard, and supported so they can go off and reach those goals that each one of these companies that are coming to North Carolina and they ask for diversity, that they can bring those jobs to fruition and they can build the type of North Carolina that we can be proud of. One popular talking point of DEI is it elevates underqualified students.
That's true.
Based on race and background.
Correct.
It does just the opposite again.
No, that's not true. That's literally what DEI does. It absolutely ignores, in large part, qualifications, whether we're talking about schooling or hiring or contracting practices. It ignores qualifications. It ignores who may or may not be best qualified for a position and looks at things like race as a major hiring factor. That's exactly what this legislation does. That's exactly what these horrific DEI practices have done all across the United States of America. That's exactly what has happened. So for Representative Hawkins to say, oh, this is not true, it is just a total lie.
Make sure that those kids feel seen, feel heard, they understand that no matter where they come from, that they can make it in North Carolina. And I have to make sure that I also push back on what my colleague just mentioned, that it is not about indoctrination. It is not about the things that you've heard in that opening. It is about making sure that at the end of the day, we don't lose sight of our North Star. And that is to make sure that every child has an opportunity to succeed.
Or I guess the North Star of DEI, we should actively discriminate against people based on their skin color, because that's what DEI does. Is that also the North Star, Representative Hawkins? Is that the big winning issue of DEI? Here is Representative Reeves on the other piece of legislation, Senate Bill 558, eliminating DEI in higher education, going nuts on the House floor.
It is smart, if you want to get these bills passed, to keep couching it in race. It is smart to keep couching it in different minority groups. The country became what it became because every single person that got on these shores had an opportunity. To posit, in my mind, that suddenly these groups with no economic power, no ability to control things, no ability to make anything happen until 1965, before all groups here that weren't white males had a chance to vote, did they have a chance to affect their governments and their communities. Still no access to capital, still no access to the powers of government, because at the end of the day, the most powerful people in this government in North Carolina are right here in this legislature. And I don't think any of us would pretend that everybody is represented and all interests are represented. So let's call it what it is. And what it is right now is folks have used everything that has made this country great, and they have just made it so their voices could be heard. And what we are doing today is doing everything we can to physically push those voices down. What I will tell, and I mostly talk to my caucus here, you're going to feel bad, you're going to be angry, you're going to be dejected. But the one thing that this country got started with was the right to vote. And so they can shut you down in government institutions. They can shut you down when you walk on the street. They can charge you with felonies when you go out and you try to voice your disagreement with their beliefs. But they can't at this time stop you from voting.
I have no idea what the hell Representative Robert Reeves is talking about, charging you with felonies when you walk on the street. I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about as it relates to DEI in public education. He's got the job that he's got to do. He's got to stand up there and hold the talking points, carry the water for the Democrat Party here in North Carolina. So no big surprise there in his commentary. And just like all of the other pieces of legislation, when the final vote tally came in, 71 to 47, those two pieces of legislation dealing with DEI in K through 12 public education and in higher education, the UNC system and the community college system here in the state of North Carolina passed. 71-47, notwithstanding the governor's veto, those pieces of legislation are now law here in the state of North Carolina. Now, Senate Bill 50 remains unheard. It is the last of the 5 veto overrides that remain on the House calendar. From all of the details that I've been able to ascertain as it relates to this, there are as many as 4 Republican lawmakers that are not in favor of Senate Bill 50 constitutional carry here in North Carolina. With that many Republicans against it, simply put, the GOP does not have the votes to move forward with that override. Will that change in the coming weeks before the legislative short session ends? That remains relatively unclear here today. Nevertheless, I'll be keeping an eye on this and continue coverage of the short session right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, I've got one final clip for those in southeastern North Carolina. Representative Deb Butler, the do-nothing Democrat from House District 18. She predominantly represents downtown Wilmington, got on her soapbox, as many of these other Democrats did, arguing over the rules, arguing over the procedure. House Speaker Destin Hall laying out the process that is actually playing out in Raleigh.
It appears that these override votes here that we are seeing today are very well choreographed. And so
Choreographed?
I would
Hold
ask
on, wait, what does she mean? Choreographed? What does that mean? Like set up? You mean like members were told show up because we're going to be doing veto overrides? I don't know that I would say that that's highly choreographed or well choreographed. Just simply saying, hey, Republicans, we're going to do a veto override. Make sure your asses are in Raleigh so we can conduct the vote. No idea what she's talking about.
you to reconsider the question of privilege concerning the integrity of the House's proceedings.
Yes,
because
integrity.
the ability of members to deliberate and represent their constituents is central to the institutional rights of this body. When debate is terminated on matters of substantial public importance, it raises a real question about the dignity of this House and the integrity of these proceedings. I ask you to reconsider and allow fervent debate on this matter.
Before Representative and House Speaker Destin Hall gives his response, the irony of Democrats arguing about integrity in a process is so unbelievably hypocritical. They wouldn't know integrity if it punched them in the face. But now, of course, because they're in the minority, because they're not in charge, they want to preach to the GOP about, oh, the integrity of the process, and oh, you have to let all these voices be heard, and please, you're putting a shame on the North Carolina House for not allowing debate on bills that have been debated for hours on end. Folks, this is not a debate over the legislation. This is a veto override. Democrats don't have the votes. Democrats are on the losing side of the issue, so this is what they result to.
The chair will reiterate that we've already had fervent debate on these bills as they came through the body the first time. Most of the provisions in them have been in multiple bills. And further, I'll note that, as everyone knows, my party has 71 members in it, meaning that if only 2 people on the other side are out, we can override any one of these that we want to. Despite that, the chair put out a calendar, essentially guaranteed the days that we would vote, and typically only 2 days per week. We could vote every single day. And what the chair simply could have done is say, week to week, we'll let you know, keep you here all week long, wait till one of you are out. But frankly, I decided not to do that for many of the reasons that the lady just discussed. And again, didn't have to do that. I certainly had the votes to get into the rules to do that very thing, to make y'all sit up here all the time unnecessarily. But we didn't. We're here essentially 2 voting days per week. These bills have been well debated. I realize that there's certain members who are against the subject matter in these bills, and that's fine. But that doesn't call into question of this body at all. In fact, it's just simply the way our government works, the way it's worked in this state for a long time. No rules are violated. In fact, I would say we've gone out of the way that in many ways hindering the ability to override vetoes. And so I note the lady's comments and questions, but my view of the world is completely the opposite. This body has frankly bent over backwards to give notice to the members of both parties when we're going to be here, and we've been here about 2 days a week.
Destin Hall's absolutely right with that comment. When Democrats controlled the North Carolina General Assembly, they did not produce calendars. They did not give lengthy heads-up periods to lawmakers when they needed to make their way to Raleigh. And he is accurate. Here's the calendar that was published months ago, back in mid-April. This was the calendar published by the Speaker of the North Carolina House in Destin Hall, showing the dates in which there would be votes and days where there could be votes, laying out every single day. No Mondays, no Fridays in the entirety of the month of April. For the majority of June, no Mondays and no Fridays. This is the calendar. So everybody knew. The House Speaker in Destin Hall, the Republican Majority Leader, has no ability, has no reason, has no obligation to let Democrats know when votes are going to happen outside of just a regular notice period. But he did. And still, of course, surprise, surprise, it's not good enough for Deb Butler. It's not good enough for Representative Laura Budd from Mecklenburg County. It's not good enough for Representative Maury, the Democrat out of Durham County. It's never enough. It's never good enough. It's never, the Republicans are always doing it the wrong way. If they were in charge, they would be doing it better. I'll remind you, after 100 years of Democrat control in the North Carolina General Assembly, when the Republicans were in the minority, they were treated horrifically on the floor of the North Carolina House, having their speaking privileges stripped away, votes happening in the middle of the night without proper notice. It was a complete and total sham. Here's the reality. The voters have spoken for the last 15 freaking years and have consistently given Republicans a majority in the North Carolina General Assembly. If you don't like that, if you're a Democrat and you say, well, that's not good, that needs to change, then start running better candidates and start having better ideas. The voters have spoken every 2 years for the last 15 years, and they're going to speak again coming up in November. And they have consistently rejected the North Carolina Democrat Party, their stupid, idiotic, and ridiculous ideas. If you want to be angry at somebody, be angry at yourself for being a party that is so wholly incapable of gaining any sort of significant power here in the state of North Carolina. And I'll get off my soapbox. That's the long and the short of it. You want to win, you want to be in control, have an idea that people actually resonate with here in North Carolina, because for the last 15 years, you haven't. You haven't. And it's why Republicans have consistently held majorities and supermajorities. A miserable day in Raleigh and across the state for Democrats as the Republican legislature throughout this session, the 25-26 session, has now overridden 14 different vetoes that Governor Josh Stein vetoed. And hopefully we'll see Senate Bill 50 making its way back in the coming weeks. We'll keep you up to date right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, that's going to do it for a Thursday edition. Look forward to seeing everybody on our Patreon hangout tonight. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support, lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy the day. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.